Hi, good afternoon. I have to say, by the way, I'm a very proud product of the San Francisco Bay Area. Crittenden Middle School, Mountain View High School, San Francisco State University, African American Studies, Political Science major. So, I just have to say that. So, I am very honored to be here. In the past 6.5 years, I've been traveling like a walking uncomfortable conversation to 48 states, and I've done nearly about 1,000 events, including Tea Party meetings, conservative meetings, Republican meetings, as much as I possibly can, to ask this quintessential question of how do you define American? So I want to explain kind of what we do at Define American. So we are a nonprofit media and culture organization whose primary task is changing the culture in which we think and talk about immigrants in America today. Notice that I'm not separating the legal from the quote-unquote illegal, the documented from the undocumented. That's because undocumented immigrants like me live in families where I'm the only undocumented person and everybody else is a US citizen or a green card holder. It's complicated, right? Here are the questions that drive our work at Define American. So how are immigrants being portrayed in the news media, in television shows and radio shows? How are immigrants being portrayed in movies and television, in what we call popular culture? How are teachers and educators talking about immigration and immigrants in their classrooms? How did we get to a point where being anti-immigrant is not only culturally acceptable, being anti-immigrant can actually win you the White House? How did we get there? And at a time of the essential movement for Black lives, at a time when we must never forget about Native Americans and indigenous peoples, how do we talk about immigrants and insist on telling America's full story? I would argue that we've arrived at a moment in which all our lies, our delusions, and our myths have stared us and are staring us right in the face. So here is something I was given to me when I landed at an airport in California when I was 12. It's a green card. Apparently it's not even green. I'm colorblind, I didn't know. Got here from the Philippines, I was 12, I thought everything was fine. 4 years later, went to the DMV to get a driver's license in Mountain View, and the woman at the DMV said, "This is fake, don't come back here again." And the only thing I could say to her was, "I'm not Mexican." Because when I was growing up, that's what people thought. Illegal, no papers, Mexican. And I told her, "I'm not Mexican, my name's Jose, it's called Spanish colonialism." She's like, "I don't care what you are, you're not supposed to be here." Ever since then, I've been very, very confused about what this card and what that means. And then I was really lucky to be exposed to the work of this essential American writer and thinker, Toni Morrison.
To make an American, you had to have all of these people from these different classes, different countries, different languages, feel close to one another. So what does an Italian peasant have to say to a German burgher? And what does an Irish peasant have to say to a Latvian? You know, really, they tended to balkanize. Mm-hmm. But what they could all do is not be Black. So it is not coincidental that the second thing every immigrant learns when he gets off the boat is that word, nigger. In that way, he's establishing oneness, solidarity, and union with the country. That is the marker. That's the one.
What kind of need did that meet in the psyche, do you think?
Well, these were people who were frightened. I mean, I would be. You go to a strange country, maybe you have some friends there, you need a job, you've cut your bridges, you said something's terrible back home, you go and you immigrate, you go someplace else. And if it's under duress, you're facing chaos. And when you're facing chaos, you have to name it or violate it or control it in some way. So you want to belong to this large idea. You want to belong. And one learns very quickly what to belong to.
what to belong to. After reading Toni Morrison's first book, The Bluest Eye, in 8th grade, she taught me that I must never surrender to the master narrative of America. And I bring her up because I think the question to us is, how do we not surrender to the master narrative of how immigrants are talked about in this country? So I'm a journalist, I like numbers. So you've heard of the 800,000 DACA recipients in this country who are a part of the 11 million undocumented population. And the 11 million undocumented population are a part of the 43 million immigrant population in America. There are 43 million immigrants in America today, about 15% of the population, the exact same percentage during Ellis Island 100 years ago. And the 43 million people are going to be responsible for the 88% total population growth of America in the next 50 years. Can somebody tell the San Francisco Chronicle? Right? So meaning the 43 million immigrants, right, are actually not just quote-unquote minority, they're a part of the emerging mainstream. And the numbers that I'm not even showing you here is we learned by partnering with MTV that the typical white American lives in a town that is more than 3/4 white, and the typical white American group of friends is more than 90% white. And no amount of listening to Beyonce and playing Grand Theft Auto counts, right? So now at Define American, our goal is, how do we challenge media portrayal of immigrants, right? And that includes, unfortunately, going on Fox News and talking to Tucker Carlson. How do we challenge, how do we inform the New York Times and the Washington Post and NPR that human beings cannot be illegal, right? Those three organizations still use illegal to refer to people. How do we activate a young college population across this country who are done talking about this issue as if it's only about Mexico and the border? So we have a college chapter program, a Define American college chapter program in 48 colleges in 22 states all across this country, doing our work at the national level. They're mirroring it at their local level. Part of the other work is creating media. This is why Define American a couple years ago partnered with MTV to make a documentary called White People, whose job it was to talk to young white people about what it means to be white in a country that's getting less and less white. I can't wait for news organizations and production companies and television shows to do this. We also have to do this ourselves. And a big, big part of the work is curating media, right? Immigration does not exist in a vacuum. Immigrant rights is an LGBT rights issue. It's a women's rights issue. It's a Black Lives Matter issue. It's an income inequality issue. It's an environmental justice issue. It's all of these issues combined, right? And I'm saying that as a Filipino American with a totally Hispanic name who majored in Black Studies, who's gay and who's undocumented. It's part of my nature to bring people together. That's kind of what I do, because that's who I am. The trouble is, for the most part, we're not choreographing it. I love that word. We're not choreographing it that way. And I have to say, by the way, we can't really talk about immigration without addressing something that has been married to it, which is this idea of legality, which is something I've been questioning in the past 6.5 years. Questioning as I travel around the country without any sort of document in which somebody at the TSA line could arrest me at any point, or I could be arrested just walking down the street in Ohio, right? I am not legally supposed to be here. I don't have DACA. There's no protection at all. But something that have really occurred to me in the past few years of doing this work is this thinking that this was never about legality. This was always about who gets to define who an American is and who has the power to draw the borders and create the laws, right? And we're not even asking the harder questions like, why do people move, right? I'm Filipino, as I said, right? There's 4 million Filipinos here in America, 2 million in California alone. In an event in North Carolina, this man said to me, why are there so many Filipinos here? And all I could say to him was, sir, we are here because you were there. Do you remember that? Do you even know your own history? And why is it that America could come to the Philippines and Puerto Rico and Guam and Hawaii? Why is it that when Western countries come to our country through colonialization, imperialism, did you not think there was going to be an impact to us on that? What you actually call a global migration crisis is a natural progression of history, right? You call it white man's burden, you call it manifest destiny, right? What do we call it? We call it trying to live our fullest lives with as much dignity as we possibly can. Now, I have to say, today, all day today, the top trending topic on Twitter, I don't know if you saw this, has been White Lives Matter. At a white nationalist march in Tennessee that is going on right now, people were actually chanting, "Close borders, white nation, now we start the deportation." So, I'm supposed to instigate. And here's the instigation. How do we individually and collectively, and in many ways uncomfortably, I'm talking about your parents and your uncles and your aunts and your grandparents that you're about to see in Thanksgiving weekend. How do we disrupt the master narrative on immigrants? How do we transcend laws and papers, because people's lives are more than unjust laws and pieces of papers, and define American in our own communities and neighborhoods? How do we do that? Lastly, I really just want to talk about my awe and admiration for undocumented residents of the Bay Area who get up every day to drive their kids to work, to drive themselves to work, to drive their kids to school, to go live their lives as fully as they can in a country that not only criminalizes them, but says every day from the White House that it does not want them. I am in awe of their resilience. So, thank you for having me.